My name is Rhonda Villamont Smith. I'm with the Tulsa 912 Project. And the Tulsa 912 Project, in conjunction with TARA, the Tulsa Area Republican Assembly, is happy to bring you this debate between our congressional runoff candidates for the Republican Party. We hope that it's going to be an exciting evening and that you're going to learn a lot. I know that they're reporting that about 36% of people are undecided. If you are one of the undecideds, I hope that tonight answers any questions that you might have. I'm going to bring David Oldham up. He is the Vice President for TARA, and he'd like to say a few words.
I am not the star of this show. We would very much like to thank Fellowship Bible Church for the use of the facilities tonight, and their staff and the volunteers who frankly have made this whole thing happen. Without volunteers, we have nothing. We do not have the kind of Republic and the kind of meetings that you see here tonight. So this is all unpaid staff that do these kinds of things. We'd like to thank the candidates for putting themselves out and coming here tonight. The support staff of the church, the sound, the security gentleman who's helping us with everything, and then also our timekeeper, Michael Phillips, and his lovely wife. We're very thankful they keep everything on track so that this stays fair. And then finally, our moderator, Pat Campbell from KFAQ 1170 is here, and we thank him for extending the time and the effort to moderate this debate for us.
Welcome.
Very quickly, I'm going to go over the debate rules. I'm sure that Pat will go over them time to time, but I just want everybody to be aware of what's going to happen. We're going to have a 2-minute introduction. We flipped earlier a coin, not each other, for who was going to get to sit first, where they were going to sit, and who was going to go first in their introduction. And so what you're going to see is how it came out. So the questions are going to come from Pat Campbell on a variety of topics. Many of you submitted a lot of questions. I sent you, I think, 2.5 pages of questions that were submitted from people. I sent them on to Pat. Pat has the discretion on which questions he's going to ask and not. The time limits on the question are going to be 90 seconds and 60 seconds. You will know the time allotted. Pat will make that available to us as well as to the timekeeper. And in the time, with the time for you guys to know, what they're going to do here is when you're 1/3 way through your time, it's going to be a green light. When you're 2/3 of the way through your time, it's a yellow light. When you're done, it's red. So that's the way we're going to do it. In the middle of the debate, we're going to have a segment where each candidate gets to ask each other 3 questions. In that time, they're going to have a 2-minute response and a 1-minute rebuttal. We will be having a 90-second, sorry. 90-second closing statement, and we do plan to be done by 8 o'clock. So we want to get as many questions in as we possibly can. So with saying that, I'm going to leave. So you guys enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. And we're going to start with opening statements. Each gentleman will be allotted 2 minutes, and we start with former District Attorney Tim Harris.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I'm Tim Harris, and I'm the one candidate these days who's not running negative ads against anybody. That's because I believe candidates should run on the issues and on their own merits. Truth matters. My opponent's been spending boatloads of money to completely misrepresent my positions. When truth is distorted, it leads to confusion. Please allow me to eliminate the confusion right now. On term limits, we do have differences. I favor a law imposing 12-year term limits, and my opponent has signed a pledge favoring 6 years. However, I'm willing to live by my conviction and apply that term limit to myself. He's not. So who's really for term limits? On the Mueller investigation, my opponent has pretended that I'm somehow a fan of Robert Mueller. Well, my position has always been the same. I tell Mr. Mueller, stay within your limits, show what evidence you have, and finish this thing up now. The same position as President Trump. This has gone on far too long, but it is time to investigate the investigators. I'm the proven conservative in this race. That's why I have the endorsement of Wayne Bridenstine, father to our former Congressman Jim Bridenstine, Dr. Everett Piper, the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, Randy Brogdon, Pam Peterson, the Zellner brothers, and Pat Hyland. To solve serious problems, we need to fix America's moral compass. Slogans and gimmicks won't make it work. We need border security, including a wall. Spending is out of control. Entitlements have to be sound fiscal footing without tax increases. Life, religious liberty, free speech, and our right to protect ourselves and our families under the Second Amendment must be protected. This race, you have a choice. On one hand, the candidate of the establishment, Kevin Hern. On the other hand, I'm Tim Harris, the People's Conservative. I'm on your side. You can trust me. I'm asking for your vote August 28th.
Thank you, Tim. And now over to Kevin Hern. 2 minutes.
Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. I always find it interesting when somebody's been a politician that calls somebody else the establishment. I look forward for the opportunity tonight to visit with you, talk about the issues that my opponent just described, also talk to you about, what's going on in America today. Prior to this president coming to office, we all thought that business and politics didn't matter. It wouldn't work together. It was oil and water. But what we've seen happen is nothing short of a miracle in 1 year. And it's not been the Democrats that's been pushing back on him. It's been a lot of the career Republicans that's been pushing back on him to keep this going on and getting it into law, because they're all been executive orders for the most part to get us to the part we're at right now. I'm a product of Ronald Reagan when I came out of high school. And when Ronald Reagan put things into work, we had a run for 20 years of economic prosperity, culminating in 2000. And since that time, we've declined. We've been bloated with career politicians in Washington, D.C., and the opportunity to go and have people like myself, who are business people, who have spent 25-plus years fighting back on those regulations. Somebody that's had to deal with Obamacare, that spent $200,000 annually fighting back on Obamacare, not just talking about it, not reading it in the Wall Street Journal, pushing back on immigration. We need to build the wall. We talk about $25 billion. It's a drop in the bucket compared to $100 billion a year that we're spending on DEA and sending people back across the southern border, fighting on the drugs and the things in this country. And so I look forward to having the opportunity the rest of this meeting to talk about these issues, and we'll talk more about trust as we get later into this. But I would appreciate your vote as well on August 28th. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to start some questions. The time limit is at my discretion. I'll announce it before we get into the questions. So this first question is going to be a 90-second answer. It comes from David Vann over at Sooner Politics. He says more than 40% of the Republican voters are now settling for a candidate who was not, I repeat, was not their first choice in the June primary. Why are you the next best choice? Tim Harris, we'll start with you. 90 seconds.
Well, I think I'm the best choice because I'm the people's congressman. I know how to serve. I have 16 years as the elected district attorney, and this county saw fit to elect me 4 different times for 16 years. I ended up being the longest-serving DA in Tulsa County history. I didn't necessarily plan it that way. Why is that important? I know how to be accountable to you, the people. I know how to be answerable. A public servant isn't necessarily a politician nor a career politician. I know I've been analogized to a hog at the trough, but I'm in pretty good company. Firemen, policemen, sheriff, city workers, military, teachers, those are all public servants. In my heart is a heart of service. I don't need another career. I had a great career. And, people say, well, Tim, why should I play in golf? Why? Because America's in trouble. And she needs somebody to fight for her. And I've been trained to know how to do that. I will go to Washington with your agenda, not my agenda. I will vote to help you and your family and not just to get reelected. Thank you.
Same question to Kevin Hern. 90 seconds.
Again, I always love it when a career politician says they're a public servant but never a politician when they've ran for 4 different terms and got reelected and been an incumbent. You know, my opponent mentions the fact that he put all these other folks into this category. Firemen. The firemen of the CD1 endorsed me. He talks about the police officers. The police officers in the state, in the county, in Owasso, and many other cities around have endorsed me. When he talks about the teachers, I had endorsements from teachers in South Tulsa, from Melissa Abdo and from Tristy Fryer and from Lisa Kramer. So they get it. You know, there was never an intention to go out and him assemble that or to take that analogy. It was about me being a pig farmer. I grew up on a farm. I know what it's like, what you see. It was my analogy to be the swamp. I didn't hear him calling out President Trump for calling D.C. the swamp when it's full of folks that have been there forever. I know what it looks like. And I think we've had and we see, you know, for the National Federation of Independent Businesses shared with me that there are more business people running today than ever in the recorded history in this country because they want to go support this president, support his policies because they know what the problem has been year after year with career politicians who've never gone out and created jobs, who've never had to fight back on these policies, and they're fed up with having to deal with this and not having any representation in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Next question, and this is going to go to Kevin first. This will be a 90-second answer on this one. 60 Minutes did an expose on what Republican congressmen are required to do fundraising-wise once they get to Washington, D.C. And with that in mind, because Bridenstine was one of 4 who refused to do it. So when you're handed an invoice requiring you to fundraise for the RNC, what will you do? Will you refuse like Bridenstine or like Mark Wayne Mullins say, yes, sir?
Yeah, you know, it's going to be an interesting, the answer is I don't know. Here's what I do know, is that right now the Republicans are going to barely win if they win at all. And what we do know, this president has done more in the first 14, 15 months than we've ever seen. If we don't keep the House Republican and raise Republicans and get them up there, we're going to be spending the next 2 years dealing with an impeachment process, and our president that's turned this country around. Many of us went and saw Death of a Nation just a couple of weeks ago, and the analogy is he's the next Abraham Lincoln to turn this country around. This will come to an abrupt halt on November 5th or 6th, whenever that is, that we're going to see a president that's going to go through an impeachment process for the next 2 years while Nancy Pelosi tries to run him out of office. Now, we know as long as we have the Senate, we're going to be in good shape. But we've got to do everything we can at this point to make sure we maintain the majority in the House, even if it's by 1 vote, because technically speaking, on impeachment, all they need is a simple majority. If they take over the House, they will need 1 Republican to help them. They will take over and then impeach. They've already said it. That's what their mission is, to raise as much money as possible. Democrats are raising records amounts of money across this country right now through Act Blue and others. So we've got to be conscious. We just saw it happen in CD12 in Ohio. Almost lost that race, and it's been Republican since 1983. The Democrats are motivated. We can't be silly and not go out and support the Republican candidates across this country.
Same question for Tim Harris. 90 seconds, please.
You know, I'm not about party. I'm about service to people. If people come to me and put the strong arm on me, it happened to me many, many times as district attorney. It won't happen, okay? I'm not there to be a lackey. I'm not there to be bought and paid for by the power structure, by the establishment. And yet I believe the Republicans will hold the House. There is one thing that I do agree with. If we don't, we won't get anything done in this country for the next 2 years because it'll all be about impeachment, all right? So if you want to see it come to a grinding halt, which isn't much more than it's doing right now, okay, we have to stick together. But you know, this whole thing about raising money for the RNC, all right, I think people have to go out and they have to present themselves and their merits of who they are and what service they are going to perform for the people, for their constituents. That's what it's all about. And in each of the jurisdictions, I think there's a responsibility for candidates to go out with that idea, right? I mean, I know some people vote, you know, straight ticket. But most people, while I was knocking doors, said, you know, Tim, I want to vote for the person. I want to know that they have similar values, that they have similar principles as I do. And if that's what they proclaim, and I really believe that they mean it instead of some kind of bait and switch, right, I'll vote for them. So I don't know how that process works. I don't know if they come to you and they try and force you into that, but I'll never be bought and paid by anybody or any caucus.
All right, next question. Should the federal government, by the way, this is a 90-second answer on this one. Should the federal government be involved in education? If so, how and why? Tim Harris first.
You know, the Constitution is a constitution of enumerated powers to the federal government. Article 1, Section 8 spells out the powers of the federal government. I don't really see anything in there about education, but that train has probably left the track. Now, we got to figure out how to slow it down, because as far as education and teacher goes, the federal government has no business telling Oklahoma parents how and what to educate their children, all right? And so as we look at what happens, I mean, what has happened now is they have strings attached to us because of the federal dollars. And we all know what kind of a fix we're in the statewide fiscally to support our teachers and to get materials into the classroom. So a little way, they've got some handcuffs on us. But little bit by little bit, we can chip away at that and chip away at that, because I can't really see a constitutional mandate for the federal government being in education. If there is anybody here, I've got a Constitution with me. I've read it cover to cover. I can't see the authority for federal institution involving themselves in education. Education is a local issue. I'm a 10th Amendment supporter. What isn't enumerated to the federal government in the Constitution is reserved to the states and to the people. And I taught my students that at Con Law at ORU, and I'll stand behind that.
Thank you. Kevin, let me repeat the question here. Should the federal government be involved in education? If so, how and why? 90 seconds. Kevin Hearn, please.
The simple answer is no. When the Department of Education was created in October of '79 and implemented in '80, right before President Reagan came in, his plea was to eliminate the Department of Education in 1981 after he took office. And because of, at that time, we had Democrat control House and Senate, they didn't support that, and we've been fighting that battle ever since. When it was originally established, it was going to have $3 billion in funding and about 1,700 employees. Today, it has about $70 billion in it and about 17,000 employees. I can't find one year where we finished anywhere better than we did the year before in any category. And we continue to decline in the world standards. So I think it's time, just using pure common sense logic, that the politicians need to get out of the way, put the local school boards back in charge with the parents, with the communities, and get the money back in the states where it belongs. You know, again, if you look at the enumerated powers, I'll go back, and I agree with this will be one of those times I agree with Tim. There's nowhere in there that it says we should be funding education in Article 1, Section 8. Nowhere does it say that. And we need to take the opportunity when we have this president who just now currently suggested that we move it in with the Department of Labor as a process to start getting rid of the idea of Department of Education. We need to take that opportunity. I have shared that with superintendents around here. I've shared it with leadership of teachers, and they totally agree. And that's why I'm getting the support, because they know I'm committed to getting that done. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question has to do, I'm trying to, I guess, discern the differences between the two of you, and I want to bring up earmarks. This is something that's been heavily debated in the past by both Inhofe and Coburn. They were on separate sides, senators. And there seems to be a difference between you two guys, but I want to get into this. Congressionally directed funds, a.k.a. earmarks, were known as the favor factory for special interest groups and projects. Earmarks have rightly been put on hold for years. Do you support going back to the earmark practice or not, and why? And we'll start with Kevin. 90 seconds, please.
The answer is no. I said that 4 weeks ago today. My opponent said he wanted earmarks. He laid out an extravagant, eloquent oration as he started out how he justified them. But the reality is that even President Obama wanted to get rid of earmarks because he thought Hillary's spending too much. Now think about the irony there. We have Democrats wanting to get rid of it and a Republican wanting to bring them back. That's a little bit interesting, I think, and how you say you're conservative, but you want to bring earmarks back. The crowning moment of Senator Coburn's career was when earmarks got pushed out. He spent a lifetime, or his lifetime, and his limited time he was there, working on earmarks because he said it was the gateway drug to excessive spending. And it would be devastating to see those brought back. You know, I can't imagine any conservative, true conservative, wanting to bring earmarks back. An open checkbook, when we have this year, it's projected in 2019 that our deficit will be $1 trillion with no end in sight. Can you imagine how much that would accelerate that if congressmen and women were allowed, based on their seniority, to do whatever they want to do? I'll give you an example. Don Young, Bridge to Nowhere, his name was on it. So there's this debate, well, they put the name, his name was on it. He argued on the floor of the Senate. There was no way that anybody didn't know what it was. It was $232 million. You know what the argument was? Is he didn't want to give up his bridge to help the people in Katrina. He said it was not right for one state to help another state. He forgot. He doesn't have any money. It's our money. We need to not have that happen. Earmarks do not need to come back. We need to get our budget under control and quit spending more than we make.
Tim, let me reset the question one more time. Congressionally directed funds, earmarks, were known as the favor factory for special interest groups and projects. Earmarks have rightly been on hold for years. Do you support going back to the earmark practice or not, and why?
Not going back to the old way, but I support the new transparent earmarks along with President Trump, who on January 9th of 2018 suggested to Congress that we go back to using earmarks to build bipartisan support for legislation to bring parties together who are hating each other right now and getting nothing done. Think of this. This is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. In 2011, Congress banned earmarks because they were running out of control. And I agree, the Bridge to Nowhere in Alaska is an absolute fiasco. But think of this. 7 years later, we haven't saved a dime. Spending has exploded. What's the difference? Spending got passed from Congress, who is accountable to the people and the constituents, to President Obama, bureaucrats, the deep state, who are not accountable to anyone. I'd rather have Senator Inhofe spending money than Barack Obama and his Democrat cronies. Transparent disclosure, known sponsor, specific needs outlined, knowledge of what bill it's going to be in could benefit states like Oklahoma who need infrastructure repair of our levees. The Port of Catoosa needs to be dredged to a tune of $155 million. Repair of our roads, bridges, and airports. It's not the old earmark, it's the new earmark, and I support President Trump in his request.
Thank you. Next question, 90-second answer on this one, and we'll go to Tim first. Are you interested in eliminating any federal government departments, i.e. Department of Education or others? If so, which ones, and how are you going to do it?
You know, when I left the DA's office and taught constitutional law, it was an eye-opener about how we've created this fourth arm of government. All the federal agencies. So the separation of powers, the balance of power between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature is all out of whack. This is how it got so out of control. They said, hey, we live in a complex society. We want experts in these agencies to be helping us decide these complex people that affect people's lives just like you, okay? The problem is Congress abdicated their authority to the federal agencies because they have rule-making power. And there's even a case called the Chevron deference rule, okay, where they get to interpret their statutes above judges. That's wrong. We have to retract all these federal agencies. I counted up the other day. I think there's over 150. There may be more than that. It was single line on one page. I couldn't even count them all. But I would say this, if they're going to remain, they have to come in with a line item budget justifying what they've spent instead of continually asking for more and more and more and more. And yet, you know, we have some federal agencies like TSA, right? They're trying to protect us at the airport. The FAA, they're trying to protect us when the air, right? There are some things going on, like ICE. I don't want to get rid of ICE. That's insanity. We need immigration. Thank you. We need immigration control.
Same question, Kevin Hearn. Do you need it repeated?
Well, I've already stated my passion to get rid of the Department of Education, move the back to local control. I would save us $70 billion a year. You know, to explain what's happening here when the abdication of roles, when you move your power to an agency, you've moved it from the House, which is where the power of the purse is, you moved it to an agency now that is under the power of the President. So what would be a simple rule, instead of giving back earmarks, why didn't Congress and the Senate do their job and go up there and remove that same power that they gave them? It's a vote. That's what you got to do. You don't have to go create another avenue to get money back to the states. Let's remove that. In 2015, which is the last time that they actually audited, there were $571 billion in fees and fines that agencies had created across this country on you and I and many, everybody around the country that never went back into the federal treasury. $571 billion. Outside of that's about 12% of our budget. It would be if it were put into our budget. It would close our deficit by half. And so they're run amok. They create their own rules, they go out and they're judge, jury, and executioner, and we've got to rein that back in. You saw some of that with the EPA, saving $1 billion in the short time that Scott Pruitt was there. It's there. It is there, and it's going to be a fight to get it back, but it's a fight you've got to go do regardless if you're going to get it reelected or not. It is the right thing to do. We've got to rein in this government. It has gotten out of control. We're at $22 trillion in debt and growing every single day with no end in sight. We've got to stop the spending.
Kevin, did I skip you on the question about 40% of Republican voters are now settling for a candidate who was not their first choice? Did I skip over you? Or did I do both of you on that one? I got both of them. Okay, I just want to double check. Somebody had sent me something there. My bad. All right. Pretty soon here we're going to get into the section where you guys get to question each other. But before we do that, let's start with Kevin this time. What should be our military responsibility in the Middle East? 90 seconds.
You know, we've been fighting that battle for 4,000 years, and I think what this president has done, he's done a great job of saying we can't be the policeman of the world. We've been there now going on 18 years. Many of the folks in this room have either been there or their sons or daughters have been there, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And it's the same policy that this president has, which is to go try to resurrect the government there and leave. And he's doing it through a lot of things besides just military. It's about financial pressure you see every day where he's imposing, some would say tariffs are problems, but you see what China's doing right now coming back, wanting to figure out how to get over that. If you look at Iran and Iraq, we've got to do what we did in Iran and remove that bad deal. We have a tremendous support in Israel. We can never waver on the support of Israel because it is our forward front in the Middle East. Every day they're under an onslaught that none of us would ever want to experience, and because of the support from the United States of America, from citizens like you and I, they stay safe. They're the forward front on democracy, and they understand what's going on, and we get a lot of our cues from there. You know, Syria's a bad place. Russia's trying to come in. Iraq's a bad place. We can't figure out who's going to want to take over that when we leave. We look at Afghanistan. It's going on and on. We've had Russia in there. We're in there. We're not going to fix 4,000 years worth of problems. We need to figure out what we're going to do quickly based on the intel we have and get out of it. And I think that's what the president's doing right at this moment.
Same question for Tim Harris. What should be our military responsibility in the Middle East? 90 seconds.
You know, for too long, our allies didn't trust us and our enemies didn't fear us. That's wrong. That's bad policy, bad foreign policy. We need to stand strong with Israel. When Israel is strong, the United States is safe. I mean, think about this. Iran calls us the big Satan, and they call Israel the little Satan. They burn American flags in the streets while they're marching, right? And death to America. We can't allow that to happen. That's why when we wrap around Israel, it shows the strength. And when Russia supports Iran, look at what President Trump did. And I'm so proud of him. When there was evidence that there was use of chemical weapons, he did very, very specific rifle shot strikes against them. And that was a shot across the world that said, be careful. If you're going to annihilate your people with chemical weapons, we're going to step in, and we're not going to let that happen to people. I don't believe that we should be the policemen of the world. But in that area, if we don't stand with Israel, it'll unravel, and we have to make sure that we keep Russia at bay because they want to supply to Iran. And so this is a hot spot, but we got to stand strong with our allies, and if we do, there'll continue to be peace for us here in the United States also.
Thank you. The next question comes to us from Dr. Everett Piper from Oklahoma Wesleyan University. It's a hypothetical. Let's say you gentlemen win a first term. Then Jim Bridenstine decides, you know what, NASA's not for me. He says he's going to run again. Would you run against him? Why or why not? Tim Harris, go. 90 seconds.
Well, I respect Jim Bridenstine, and I'm very much pleased that his dad, Wayne Bridenstine, has endorsed me, and that Dr. Everett Piper has also endorsed me as a true conservative in this race. You know, I know Jim. I've talked on the phone. I have his cell number right here in my phone. You know, who knows what the future holds? I highly doubt that in a short period of time he would say it's not for me. I've heard him speak. The committee he was on taught him a lot about satellites. Very, very smart about satellites. And so I don't really see in the future that he's going to walk away from that and say, oh, this wasn't for me. I'm sure that he thought long and hard about it before he went there. And that's not the kind of a man that I know Jim Bridenstine to be. In the event that that happened, I would have to look at my future and what I wanted for my future. I want to serve you, the people. I'm not going there to feather my nest. And so it all depends how far into the terms of the 12 years that I've locked myself into that this would all come about. But you know what? You look into the future, you put your hands and your life into the Lord's hands, and you see what happens next.
So hold on. For clarification, the hypothetical from Dr. Piper was after your first term. So it's not 12 years. First term, did I get a yes or a no? That's what I'm looking for.
A yes or a no? Well, now you box me in. Well, if I'm only there 2 years and I'm establishing myself, I will be the incumbent. I will run again.
Thank you. Same question for Kevin Hern, please. 90 seconds.
Thanks. You know, Pat, back on Friday before the June 26th election, you asked and you said everybody supports Jim Bridenstine at this table. You said the best way to discover that is you ask every candidate how much they contributed to his campaign. The first person you asked that question to was Tim, and he said nothing. And when you got around to myself, my wife and I, Tammy, we maxed out to Jim every cycle, $15,400. Even when some business people in town ran a candidate against him, we had a fundraiser at our house on May 9th. I think Rhonda was there as well. And we had Tom Coburn headline that to push back on the business people in town. About 97% of those folks are not supporting me to this day for that very reason. You know, there's no question that Jim was great for this district. There's no question whatsoever. He was fighting against a guy, a president, who wanted to replace the Constitution with some ideology called Obama. And it was not one of those times. It was very fun to be there. I think Jim has got the greatest job he's ever wanted to have with NASA. It fits in his background beautifully. You know, I've supported Jim. It's on the record of supporting Jim. My opponent has not. And it's not because he didn't have the money, because he just put money into the race. He had plenty of money. He could have written a $2,700 check to Jim at any time. He gave to other candidates along the way, so he could have given to Jim at any time. So I love this newfound support of his. Also love the newfound support of the 12-year term limit. That's an epiphany after 14 and a half months of running for office that he decided he was going to be in for 12 years.
Again, just for clarification purposes, was that a yes or a no?
I'm sorry, was it yes, would you run? Yes, I would run.
You would run, okay. All right. All right, let's see. And I think I go over to Kevin next. 60 seconds on this one. Who are you supporting for governor here in Oklahoma in the Republican runoff?
For me?
Yes.
I have been very plain about this. I am not openly supporting anybody. I didn't know either gentleman prior to their announcing their run. You know, both of us need all of the candidates or the votes in the area. And so, you know, obviously there are differences. There are good things and bad things about both candidates on the Republican ticket. And so I have not openly, nor have I told anyone who I'm supporting, and nor do I plan to, including them.
All right. Thank you. Same question over to Tim Harris, please.
I don't think it's wise when you're running for a congressional seat here in the 1st District to come out and endorse a gubernatorial candidate. I'm looking at both of them. I'm praying for wisdom from the Lord to decide, because this person will be the leader of the state. This person better have an idea on how to solve the education dilemma that we're in and fund teachers and get things into the classroom. So when I look at them, I see the things that Mick has done in Oklahoma City. He certainly didn't do those whole, you know, on his own. They had started and he came in. You know, he is a collaborator. He has great ratings. I think Fortune 500 magazine rated him the 25th most effective leader in the country. But then you look at the businessman that Kevin Stitt is and what he's grown. I think they both have pros and cons. I'm very disappointed that they're not talking about issues, that they've gone negative on each other, and that sours me against both of them.
All right, since we brought up Obamacare, let's start with that one, and I'm going to start with Tim, a 90-second answer on this. Do you support full repeal of Obamacare, and do you believe that the Obamacare repeal bill was handled correctly by the House leadership? 90 seconds.
You know, Republicans said repeal and replace for on and on and on and on. And in 2017, we had an opportunity to do it, and we didn't. Shame on the Republican Party for not doing that. They made a promise to the American people, and they broke it, okay? Some of the things that I think we have to do to get this right is association health plans, purchasing co-ops, interstate competition so you can buy your policies across state lines. That'll draw down the cost of policies of health care plans for you, the consumers. And then health care savings accounts for younger people. We all know younger people in their 20s and 30s aren't going to the doctors very much. Let's figure out a way for them to build up a savings account that when they get older they can draw upon. In the early times, yeah, they'll probably have a higher deductible, but they're not going to use it more than likely on the actuarial tables talking about who needs health care and who doesn't. So, you know, we have to look at this. We have to tell the American people not only we're going to do something for them, but actually come up with a plan. I thought that the plan that the House came up with, I was disappointed when it didn't pass in the Senate. I thought it didn't get us completely where we needed to go, but it certainly was a whole lot better than what we've got right now, because the premiums are killing American people right now.
Same question, Kevin Hearn, on Obamacare. 90 seconds.
Yeah, you know, on this one, I'm with Rand Paul, and he said not repeal and replace, repeal. Because to replace means put another government program in place, and we don't need another government program. And I love the health savings account that Tim talked about. That's actually one I talked about 8 months ago. And actually that came from Tom Coburn in 2007. So he was working on this prior to Obamacare, trying to get the House and Senate to put it in place. You know why? It's because he was a small business person, a doctor. He knew what happened on the other side of the fence. Not somebody that's been in Washington, D.C., that's never had to employ anybody, that's never had to fight back on the government on health care. I have spent a fortune in the last 4 years on Obamacare to people who don't want it, who think I'm the culprit, I'm the bad guy because I've had to introduce it. And we're still, even to this day, we're still under the same regulations as business owners in America to report, even though most people aren't taking it anymore because there's no penalty anymore that was set aside for just a period of time in January that could quickly be put back in place with the Democrat House coming up in November. So, yes, full repeal. Health savings accounts so that you can carry over infinitum until you pass away, and it's a tax credit. It's not a tax deduction, meaning that the money never gets to the federal government. It is your money. It stays in your HSA and for you to use on your health care.
Thank you. All right, next comes the fun part. This is where they get to ask each other questions, and the rules change a little bit here. They ask a question. The person will get 2 minutes to answer it, full 2 minutes. Then the person who asked the question gets a 1 minute rebuttal, and that's it. In other words, you got the last word. Okay. I've asked both gentlemen to bring 3 questions with them, not show them to anyone else. I haven't seen the questions, have no idea where they're going. It's open. They can do whatever they want with the questions. And let's start with Kevin. Your first question for Mr. Harris, please. And he'll have 2 minutes to answer.
Sure. Tim, at our meeting 4 weeks ago, you said, and I don't have the exact quote here, I can look into Tulsa World because it was in there, that you felt like President Trump's tariffs were going to destroy our economy. What experiences in your life do you feel that make you better equipped to negotiate deals than Donald Trump?
Well, I think I'm a darn good negotiator. I did it for 28 years. And so I'm a good negotiator. But tariffs, I understand what the president is trying to do. The president is very, very unique in the style of which he does things. The short-term tariffs are trying to shake trees in all the nations around the globe to get them to the negotiation table, okay? If it doesn't work, I hope you have to strategize and loop back around and see, okay, the short-term tariff didn't work. What will get these nations to the table? Just before we left here tonight, I saw some breaking news that actually China is actually beginning to negotiate a trade deal with the United States. President Trump does things in such a way, so differently, and so I support him. But don't forget this, long-term tariffs is socialism. Why? It's the government controlling something that ought to be in the free marketplace, and that's why long-term I don't support it, but it appears the short-term tariffs are working because he's bringing countries to the table to negotiate, hopefully, NAFTA with Canada and Mexico and with all the European nations. I mean, listen, we have to have our allies with us. We need everyone in the Pacific Rim. We need everyone in Europe. We need Canada. We need Mexico. We need to make sure that China cannot do an end run around us and sell goods without paying tariffs. So if we are aligned and allied together, we can bring China in play, who is the biggest offender of any trade deal, and it looks like the president's techniques are going to win again. He's quite the president.
All right, and Kevin, you've got a 1-minute rebuttal. Last word on this question.
So that sounds like you are against the president's negotiating skills before your forum, after your forum. But, you know, as a person that spends about $6.5 million a year in our McDonald's just buying products, the first thing it was hit was agricultural products. So we saw this impact. I have another company that makes seating and tables for restaurants by steel and plywood, another industry that was hit. You know, I think what the president knows is that we have a long-term problem in this country that he's got a short time to work on fixing it. He's got to get these bad actors back in place, whether it be NATO, whether it be China, whoever it may be. And we've got to get after this, support this president, as I have done since March 9th, 2017, when I launched my campaign. I haven't just become a Trump supporter in the last 90 or 120 days.
All right. Next question, Tim Harris gets to ask of Kevin, and Kevin will have 2 minutes to respond. Tim?
Mr. Hearn, why did you attempt to run against our former Congressman Jim Bridenstine 2 years ago in 2016, and according to Jim Bridenstine himself, spread false statements about him?
So that's a great question. The answer is that I didn't go run against him. I actually brought him and Gabe to my house in 2014 when he was looking at running for Senate. They sat in my living room because at that time there were some folks asked me at that time if I'd be interested in running, and I told Jim and Gabe that I would never run against him, and I never ran against him, ever. The actually happened in 2016. There were a group of business guys that came to me and said, hey, we'd love to get you to run now. I said, I'm not going to do it. They said, you should. You can beat him. I said, you cannot beat Jim Bridenstine. They ran a poll. They came back at 81%. I met with Jim Bridenstine at the Panera's at 71st and Lewis, gave him the numbers. His request from me was, how do I get these business people on board? I said, Jim, I don't know, but I'll help. He was going to Oklahoma City that day. We worked on putting a fundraiser together. On May 9th, we had a fundraiser when they announced that they were going to get Tom Atkins to do it because I wouldn't. And so they did, and the numbers were within 1% of the poll that was ran. And so I didn't, and I remind everybody again what Pat asked us all the Friday before June 26th, who actually supported Congressman Bridenstine in this race. I was the guy at the table that actually supported my wife and I all 3 terms when he ran.
And Tim, you've got a 1-minute rebuttal. Last word.
The only rebuttal comes from Congressman Bridenstine himself, June 20th, Wednesday, out of the Tulsa World. Quote, Kevin Hearn has been using my name and image in his campaign ads for Oklahoma's 1st Congressional District. Voters should know that Kevin Hearn initiated a run against me in 2016 and poll-tested messages that included terrible lies about me. I learned of this when the pollster called my home. Now he uses my name and image in ads as if we were close. Kevin Hearn's later support of me was opportunistic and based on self-interest, knowing I had limited my terms. Close quote.
And again, that picture was at the fundraiser at my house for supporting Jim.
Guys, you're supposed to get the last word. So, all right, next question. This is the second one, and we're going to start with Tim Harris this time. You get to ask Kevin another question. Kevin, you will get a 2-minute response, and then Tim will get a 1-minute rebuttal.
Mr. Hearn.
I think it's actually the other way around, but that's all right. He got the last word on that one, so that was his rebuttal. So I should go.
Yeah, but he's asking the question now. You get 2 minutes to answer it, and he'll get a rebuttal on that.
Did you ask the first question?
Yeah. I'm going back and forth. All right?
Kevin, have you ever contributed to a political action committee or to an individual candidate to support the election campaigns of Democrats or liberals? If so, when and how much did you contribute?
Yes, I gave $17,000 over a 14-year period as a McDonald's franchisee, along with thousands of other franchisees over those years. As a business owner, I don't have time or didn't have time to go to Washington, D.C. all the time. I wasn't a politician. I didn't have time. I didn't know anybody. My only time I'd spent working with anybody was with Senator Coburn and with Congressman Bridenstine. And so McDonald's, who is a very large company, who has many franchisees, who the unions would love to unionize, spent every effort they could to unionize us, through a joint employer, through $15 hour minimum wage issues, to card check, all of those things that would have affected every franchisor in the country. So every franchisee, it was ran by franchisees. At that time, about 30% of the folks that were given those monies were those Democrats, as we learned later in the polling or in the information that came out during the Club for Growth hit. 70% were given to people like Justin Amash, Tom Coburn, Senator Inhofe, Rick Santorum, people that were never mentioned in that hit. So we need to have the facts straight, what really happened there, people who supported keeping the unions out of our business.
Tim, you get a 1-minute rebuttal.
Well, as I remember, this issue came up when the other gentlemen were in the race with us, especially Mr. Coleman. And as I remember, your answer was, well, you gave to the McDonald's PAC, but you didn't really pay much attention to where they distributed their money. Well, you're giving money to your business, to a PAC, that ends up filtering some of that to liberal Democrats like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Don't you think you should have paid a little bit more attention to where your money was going in the PAC?
I also remember you're the one that said we'll walk across the aisle to work with Democrats. I think they're Democrats.
All right. This time, Kevin, you get a question. You ask Tim a question. Tim, you get 2 minutes to respond. Kevin, you got a 1-minute rebuttal, please.
Tim, would you ever consider voting for a budget that had funding for Planned Parenthood?
Never. Never. There are certain principles that are lined out in the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. These are unalienable rights, meaning you can't be alienated from them. They can't be taken away from you because they are given to you by who? By a creator, God. If God gave them to you, no man, no government, nobody can take them away from you. And the number one listed priority to there is life, and then liberty, and then the pursuit of happiness. So I will never support a bill, and I know one of the bills that the Congress voted on, I wanted to see the military increased, but it had funding for Planned Parenthood in there, as much as I would have wanted funding to build our military, because I think we have to, because Obama has decimated the military and made us weak in the world. We can't have that. But there are principles and there are preferences, and I'll never walk away from my principles, and life is precious.
Kevin, by the way, you stole my question. I was actually going to ask that question, but go ahead. You got a 1-minute rebuttal.
I, too, would never vote for a bill. I have said many times I would never vote for a continuing resolution. I think what the biggest problem we have in America today is the congressmen and women that have gone to Washington, D.C., and the senators have gotten rid of their job, of which is go up there, pass a bill, appropriate the bill, and get the 12 appropriation bills done so that we, on October 1, we have a budget we can move forward with. And because of that, the issue of Planned Parenthood never gets addressed. It just keeps getting kicked down the road. And Planned Parenthood says, well, we're never taking money from the government. Money is fungible. It gets moved across. It gets used. If we want to do something with the money, let's get it over to the federally qualified health centers so that women can have the health they need, and let's get rid of Planned Parenthood once and for all from the federal funding. It's got to go.
So we're on to question number 3. Is that correct, Ronna? Number 3. All right. Third question. Kevin, you get to ask Tim this time. Tim, you get 2 minutes. Kevin gets a 1-minute rebuttal.
Tim, you've spent a lot of time talking about my past. All I've talked about in my commercials is what's happened in the last 4 weeks. That's it. You know, there's been a lot of people call us over the last year talking about things that you've done in your past as a DA. And one most recently has been, just seems like every day somebody's calling us about this. I just would like for you to tell the folks if you've ever apologized to Michelle Murphy for what happened.
That's a great question, and I'm so glad that you asked it.
Tim, you need to get on mic, please.
Yeah. I kind of figured you'd ask that.
Well, it wasn't just me asking, it's the people around the district. I don't know anything about the issue.
David Moss was a district attorney in 1994, and he directed me as his assistant to file a first-degree murder case against Michelle Murphy, a 17-year-old mother, and prosecute the case. Miss Murphy confessed to killing her 90-day-old child, claiming it was an accident. The child's head was almost cut off from its body and had 2 stab wounds in its chest. I put the case in the hands of the people. The jury heard her confession, heard her testify at trial, and believed she murdered her child. So much so that they didn't just give her a life sentence, they gave her a life without the possibility of parole. I did my job, the people decided the outcome. Later on in 2013, the Innocent Project got involved. They asked for DNA testing that we agreed to. They came back with a weak strain of DNA on a sheet from the home. There was a liberal Democrat judge, Judge Kello, who was going to overturn her conviction. I agreed with that. After 20 years of passage, I was unable to put the case back together, but nothing about the DNA or the forensic testing exonerated Miss Murphy or pointed the finger at anybody else. So when the Innocence Project claims she was freed on DNA, that's not the true statement. I was there to protect the people of Tulsa County. I did my job, and if I could have put the case together again, I would have tried it again personally.
Kevin, you got the final word, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, I think the reason the question was asked was because back in February you were on Pat's show and he asked you about that and you refused to answer because you said it was under a federal lawsuit, but it had already been dismissed, according to what the folks have been coming to our office and talking to us about. Again, it's not about what's happened in the past, it's what they're saying has happened that, I'm sorry, not happened in the current amount of time, it's what happened in the past that seemed like it was being misled, and that's what the people couldn't figure out why you wouldn't answer that question. I said, well, I'll ask tonight.
This man never asked me that question on the air. Okay, and when it came about and I heard criminal defense lawyers bringing up lies and what criminal defense lawyers do all the time, throw up innuendo without any evidence, I actually sent him the federal document that showed the facts that were undisputed in this case. He has them, I have them, I can distribute them to the community. Nothing was ever lied about. I believe that she killed her child, and through a technicality of the law, she didn't get a chance for another trial. I wanted to try her again, and I couldn't.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the final one. Tim, you get to ask Kevin a question. Kevin, you get 2-minute response. Tim, a 1-minute rebuttal, and then we'll get back to questions from me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Hearn, I have looked at your push cards that have been coming to our home for quite a long time. And you have pictures of the President, President Trump, almost on every one except for this last one. Did you have permission to use his likeness, the likeness of President Trump, on your campaign literature and advertisements? Did you ask for his permission before you used it?
I did not. Nor has probably many other people, like the cardboard cutouts we've had for over a year, like people wearing hats around that they put their own logos on. There's people who love this country that love Donald Trump. I'm one of those guys. I'm proud to be associated with him. I've been proud to be associated with him since March of last year. I've had the opportunity to share this with people that are close to the White House. There's not been an issue with it. I didn't ask for permission directly, no.
Tim, rebuttal, 1 minute.
Well, Mr. Hearn, don't you think without asking permission to put you standing with the President with his hand over his heart like he's taking the Pledge of Allegiance right next to you implies some kind of an endorsement from the President which you don't have?
So is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, like I said, it's like all the other people who come up, put their arms around our cardboard cutout, and they don't have his endorsement as well. People love this president. I love this president, and I'll stand by that.
Well, I love him too.
All right.
You should put his picture next to you.
Okay. All right, since we got into that little exchange, that leads into the next question. Who did you support in the 2016 presidential primary and why? 60 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Harris.
Well, Pat, you asked me that question, and I refused to answer it, but I won't refuse to answer it tonight. Originally, I was going to vote for Ted Cruz. He's a debater. I really think that he was good. But I have a lot of respect for Senator Coburn and Senator Inhofe. And I had conversations where I overheard them talking about different people, and they believed, from what I consider insider knowledge from being there and being around people, that they thought Marco Rubio was the best candidate to be the President of the United States. I respect those men. I voted for Marco Rubio.
All right. Same question for Kevin Hearn, 60 seconds, please.
Amazingly, it's the same exact reason, which was I was after Tim, so my response is exactly Tim's response. But my interview was after Tim, so I guess that's how he got who he elected or voted for. We'll never know. But I said, and for the same reason, I asked Senator Coburn. I did not ask Senator Inhofe. I asked Senator Coburn because I was not in town. And here's a guy that was closer to all of them. It probably wasn't one of my better judgments. It's the only president I've ever given money to. And I thought, obviously if I'd been more politically correct, I probably would not have done that. I probably would have done a lot more to consider who the person was. But there's no question who I voted for in the November election, Donald Trump all the way.
Okay. A little follow-up to that, too, with Tim Harris. The day I had him on off air, he did tell me that he voted for Marco Rubio in the primary. He didn't say it on air, didn't want to, for reasons of his own, but he told me that day. So,
fair enough.
With that said, okay, both of you guys are now Trump enthusiasts. You're on the Trump train. Okay, why are you supporting the president now, and what does that mean? Starting with Kevin, we'll give you 60 seconds.
Well, I think it's what I've been saying every day since I've been on the campaign trail. I'm an outsider. There's no question that I have never ran for office before. I have no clue what it was like running for office, having never done it. I would assume the president would probably said the same thing. I know he did, in fact, because Stuart Jolly, who was his national field director, who is also an endorser of mine, has shared some of the backroom stories about the president running for office. I will tell you also that the president, in my opinion, based on what I have heard through the news media, didn't go there to get the best job he's ever had or making the most money he's ever made, and he's not taking a pension, which is what I have said since day one. I'm not going to get the best job I've ever had, and I'm certainly not going to go make the most money I've ever made. And I've said from the beginning, from first day, first minute, first second, I'll remove myself from the government pension rolls. I think it's an atrocity that we send people to Washington, D.C. as elected officials to get a pension at 5 years and 1 day. That's a problem for me because it entices you to stay, and that's not what we need. To go do a job and go home.
Thank you. Same question for Tim Harris.
Once President Trump became our nominee, I started looking at him closer. And the one thing that really drew me to him is he's unorthodox. In my lifetime, I've never seen a president do the things that this president does. But when he stands up and he's trying to build up America instead of making international apologies like Obama did, I got to say that's the man that's going to lead when he says, I want to make America great again, okay? He's doing what he said on the campaign trail. If we don't secure the southern border, our national security could be at stake. So I support him, and I support the wall. I like what he's doing with the economy. We have the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded, right? The media doesn't want to give him his due on anything. And so I'm going to stand with him because although he's unorthodox, he has a way of getting things done. And I will look at that. But I'll tell you this, I have two things that I will do.
Thank you. All right, the next thing I want to get to is trust. One of the things that made Jim Bridenstine such an exceptional congressman is that you could trust him. What he said, he always delivered on what he said. He's got such impeccable character. He's one of the few people I would actually trust with my life. He's that good, okay? So we're sitting here looking at you two guys, and we're trying to discern who can we trust. So the question is going to be, how do we know that we can trust you? And Tim, I'm going to start with you, please. 60 seconds. Actually, I'll give you 90 if you need it.
In fact, I've said publicly in many debates, and we've been at it 15 months, this comes down to one word, for the people of the 1st District. And all the doors I've knocked and all the eyes I've looked into, the one word is trust. You know, they don't feel like they can trust anybody anymore. In fact, there was a 1974 survey that was done, and they asked how many Americans, what percentage, trusted their governmental elected officials. 74%. Okay? I thought, okay. They go back and do that again in the early of 2018. You know what the percentage was? 9%. Okay? That means the American people have no trust in the people that are going there because they go and they do say one thing and they do another. My word is my bond. I've trained all my lawyers that, listen, if your handshake and your word isn't good enough, then you don't really belong in this office, because you have to give a man and a woman your word that they can trust. I have a record. I will stand by it. I'm tested. I'm proven. I'm reliable. And I will be your servant in Washington.
Same question for Kevin Hearn. How do we know that we can trust you?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, I've never been, or fortunately, I would say, that I've never been an elected politician, so I don't have a voting record. I'm not in front of everybody, but I think, you know, from all of the print that's been going on for the last year, that it's been pretty obvious that I've been very blessed, my wife and I, for what's happened in this country for us. You know, I've always said, you know, our mission field is the restaurants we worked in, putting people to work, getting on the first rung of the ladder. And what comes with that, we've got approximately, I checked today, about 2,300 people that support, or that we support every single day, and they trust that we'll make great decisions, that they'll be able to put food on their table at night, make their car payments, make their rent payments. There's no greater trust than when you have people that depend on you every single day not to make a bad decision. For 13 years, I traveled this country working with 3,500 franchisees of all walks of life. They didn't give two hoots whether I was Republican or Democrat. They needed help. And that represented about 700,000 employees. And they wanted to make sure that we did the right thing so that they would have an opportunity to put food on their table, make their car payments, and make their rent payments. There's no greater trust than creating jobs and putting people back to work. And that's why this president has been so successful, because people trust him for what he's done and who he is, because he never had a voting record either before he started this job.
Thank you. This sort of piggybacks on that one. With the exception of people like John Sullivan and Jim Bridenstine, most of the elected officials, when they go to D.C., they come back much wealthier than when they initially went there. So how do we know that you have the best interest of the 1st District at heart, and that you're not just in it for the personal status many politicians get in Washington?
Who's first?
I want to go to Tim this time. 90 seconds.
Well, first of all, people say, well, what about Potomac fever? And I say, listen, I had one of the most powerful jobs, as my 55 assistants did. On our signature, a man or a woman went to jail. The president can't even do that. So the whole power thing, I've taught my assistants, and I have taken 28 years to learn how to measure your authority and your power. You know, you can trust that, right, when you go to Washington. And the money part of it, listen, I was a cement mason before I went back to law school. I got lured out of the DA's office after 4 years to go into private practice, was making more money than I ever made in my life doing complex construction litigation that I understood. I thought it was a hand in glove. One morning over breakfast, my lovely wife, Tiari, looked at me and said, when are you going to go back to your first love? And I said, well, what are you talking about? She goes, you know darn well, you love serving people, and it isn't happening in this job. I took a $45,000 cut in pay to leave private practice to follow my dream of serving people. I have a heart of service for you, and so the power structure and the money, there's no shiny thing dangling in front of me. That's not why I'm going. I'm going because I love this country, and I want you to have a voice you can trust.
Same question, Kevin Hearn, 90 seconds, please.
Well, as I mentioned, I've been very blessed in this life to come from absolutely nothing to where I'm at today. And I don't have any intention to get rid of any businesses. That was one of the problems. It took forever for McDonald's to allow me to become the first franchisee in McDonald's history to run for federal office and keep my restaurants. That was important for me. If I couldn't have done it, I wouldn't have ever ran. And, you know, it was because of trust that they had that we would do the right thing and go forward. And so that I will never violate that trust that they have. For 32 years, I've been working in McDonald's restaurants, starting out as a crew person. Second thing is it's not about the money. I've just mentioned that the enticement to stay is that in 5 years and a day, you have a pension for the rest of your life. And I appreciate that Tim says what he says, but on his financial disclosure, he discloses that he gets $136,000 a year in state pension for the rest of his life. Now, that's a great enticement. And I've said what I just said about pensions all over this district with Tim here, but he's never once said he wouldn't take the federal pension, ever. So I would ask you to ask him to not take the federal pension should he become our congressman, because I think it's a anchor, it's a hook to keep people there, and we've got to stop that.
All right. Next question. I want to get to immigration, specifically Trump's pledge to build a wall. How will you vote on building a wall on the southern border, and how do you propose financing it? We'll start with Kevin Hearn. 90 seconds, please.
Well, the president's already said that NAFTA can wait a while because he's negotiating getting funding for the wall. The DEA reported in 2016 that we spent about $1.08 trillion on illegal drug trafficking back and forth across the southern border. So that's about $100 billion a year. All of that money leaves the United States and goes back to fund more drugs coming to America. The southern border is a bad place. I have friends that own McDonald's restaurants down there. It is a bad place. We've got to secure our southern border. We have a lot of Democrats and many Republicans that say that's just, we can't believe that you want to build a border wall. That's just terrible. We should have open borders. And the problem with that is that they consider a wall, meaning we're like a prison. Hey, anybody in America can leave and go to Mexico any day they want to go. Any day. They can load up and go, and we won't stop them. Mexico will stop you. They won't let you stay there illegally. But the reality is it's about protecting our sovereignty, which is one of the core beliefs I think that the government should be doing, which is protect us from bad people from afar and protecting our borders so that we have a country that we all love and enjoy our freedoms.
Just for clarification, do you support building the wall, and how's it going to be financed? So
Through the trade deficit that we have with right now it's about $30 billion we have with Mexico, closing that, and so that we can pay for the wall. I mean, right now we're projected about $25 billion to do what we need to build the wall.
Okay, so you do support building the wall?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, also from day one I've supported the wall. Since March 9th last year, I'd ask you to ask Mr. Harris where he can show he started supporting the wall.
Got it. All right, same question, Tim Harris, 90 seconds.
I supported the wall from the very beginning, but let's be very, very smart about what we do. It's about securing our people. You know, I think Sean Hannity said, a country without borders is no country at all. We don't let others decide who's going to come in. We're going to decide who's going to come in. Now, whether a physical wall has to go from the Pacific Ocean all the way across, I'm not sure. But it could possibly be a wall. It could be fencing. I know a wall is worked from Juarez to El Paso. In 1 year, their crime rate dropped 25% with the wall there, with no other variable explaining that. I'm going to support the wall. I think we need more border patrols. We need to use technology. For crying out loud, we got satellites in the car that can see a gnat on a fence pool from 10 miles up. Let's use that technology to keep us safe. Let's make sure that we spend our money and get the biggest bang for your tax dollar to keep us safe, because we have to secure that border. I prosecuted gangs for many years, and MS-13 is coming across. They're coming across with weapons. They're coming across with ice, they're coming across with marijuana, they're coming across with black tar heroin. We have got to stop that to save our people. How are we going to pay for it? I think we renegotiate NAFTA with Canada and Mexico and the other countries of the world, and when we get a more level playing field, we will have more money to do the things that the president wants to do.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Tim on this one. How will you vote on continuing resolutions? Will you insist that the normal budget process be restored? 90 seconds, go.
I don't need 90 seconds. No. No, no, no. These continuing resolutions are absolute insanity. We have, you know, I listened to Senator Langford, and he has got a bipartisan group because, believe it or not, there are even some Democrats that are working with him across the aisle to say the continuing resolution is no way to run a country. We can't do that. We have to have a budget, and we have to know how we're going to spend the money. So this continuing resolution, a cycle that we're in, is like a hamster on a wheel, and we have to get off it. Why? We got a $21 trillion debt we're going to pass on to our kids and grandkids. We have to figure out how to whittle that down, and we need to do it now.
Thank you. Same question, Kevin Hern.
Yeah, there's no question, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago in my answer, that we have to get back to regular order in creating budgets. We actually moved that up a couple years ago so there'd be opportunity to have more time, and yet we still take longer recesses in the summer so we don't get the job done, so we have continuing resolutions. I would vote no on the continuing resolution. I've said that many times over the last 2 decades as we've been in this race. That was a joke. For some of you who have been there, you know it's been a long time. I've also said I wouldn't vote for an omnibus bill, because it's the same problem we have. It's everything crammed into a spot. I will tell you the good news is I think we're through about 8 bills right now. So there's hope that we'll be there before October 1 when the budget needs to be renewed and hopefully get there. But also it's going to take a lot of hard decisions. And I was on record, and many of you know who Grover Norquist is, American for Tax Reform. I actually had an opportunity to speak there back in September, I believe it was, or August. I spoke to the group, about 150 of the most conservative people in the country there. And the question was asked of me when I got through speaking, my 3 minutes. And the question was asked, Mr. Hern, you're a fiscal conservative, you're in business, you have to figure out how to make it work. You're in a business that has a very small bottom line. Would you audit the Pentagon? And my answer was, anybody that takes taxpayer money should be available for an audit, including the Pentagon. So he said, hell yes, pardon the French. And he said, because my brother is now the new controller, and we're going to audit the Pentagon starting this fall. So the reality is that we're getting after it, we're making progress, and we need to support our president getting this done.
Thank you. Next question, this one goes to Kevin Hern. If the GOP retains a majority, again, if they retain a majority, and Kevin McCarthy or Jim Jordan are the only candidates for Speaker of the House, which one will you support and why? 90 seconds. Kevin Hern, go.
Jim Jordan.
Go. Tim Harris, same question.
You said and why. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that part. And why? Because I still believe, as I've said about Tulsa 912 Project and about Terra, I think what they represent is the true issues I'm going there for. I'm not going there for a career. I'm not going to be long. It takes 20 years to be a committee member. I'd be, I don't know, 100. I don't know how old I'd be. I'd be old. And it's not what I'm going there for. I'm going to help get back to regular order, make some tough decisions, and get back to where we need to be. But Jim Jordan right now is the person that's working hard to make that happen. Kevin McCarthy's in California. That's a crazy place anyway. They can't even balance their own budgets there. So, again, Jim Jordan, I've said that from day one. I said it on your show in February. I've said it in your show when we did the debate, and I will continue to say that.
Thank you. Tim Harris, same question.
I will work with all conservative Republicans when I get to Congress in your behalf to speak for you. I don't know Kevin McCarthy that well. I would have to do some more research on him. I probably know Jim Jordan better because I like the Freedom Caucus. I like the conservative values, and I look forward to working with them. I said I wouldn't sell my soul to any caucus or group because I believe I have to remain independent enough to make decisions in behalf of you, the constituents that send me there. So if there are groups that I can agree with, I will, and if there are groups that I have to disagree with, even though on other things, ideologically and politically, I may be with them other times, there's going to have to be times that I have to be more, independent. So really, I can't answer that question between the two because, number one, I'm not there yet, okay? And in, 11 days, we're going to have that decision. And when I get there, I will vet the candidates.
All right, next question, we'll start with Tim Harris. What House committee and subcommittee assignments do you plan to seek and why? 90 seconds, go.
I think you got to play to your strong suit. We need criminal justice reform, and I'd like to get on the Judiciary Committee. Ultimately, I would like to get on the Ways and Means Committee because they really have the power of the purse in the House, and your bills really, for the financial portion of it, have to be adopted by them. But you know, my strong suit is looking at your tax dollars being spent in our criminal justice system. I've done it for 28 years. I've looked at it, and while I was there, I came up with innovative ways to save money and hold people accountable and not break the bank. DUI court, drug court, mental health court, women in recovery, DA supervision, community sentencing. There are other ways without incarceration that we can save you, the taxpayer, dollars. Why? I'm not sure what other states are, but in Oklahoma, 4 out of every 10 that get out of the penitentiary within 3 years are back again, okay? You're paying for that, $20,000 a year per head, every year. It's breaking the bank, and we're not getting the kind of accountability that we can. We can actually do it cheaper, keeping them out, keeping them working, keeping their marriages together, keeping their kids from going to the Department of Human Services, and I believe that's the strength that I can take to the Judiciary Committee, because it's not only Oklahoma that is suffering that, it's every country. And so there are ways and means that I can talk about things.
Same question for Kevin. What House committee and subcommittee assignments do you plan to seek, and why? 90 seconds, please.
Yeah, the reality is whoever wins this office will take office in the 115th Congress. So they'll be in November, like the next week. They'll become and finish out Congressman Bridenstine's last couple months. There'll be a seat open on the Space Sciences Committee. I'd love to take that. Actually, before my McDonald's career, I'm an aerospace engineer. I would love to do that. I think that would be a natural fit. Whether I could stay on that committee, I don't know, but it would be open. It would be very easy to shoo me in there. Also, I've got an MBA in finance, so I'd love to do anything to do with financial services. I think that's where it's going to make the biggest impact. The transportation infrastructure, I know a lot about building things, and so I'd love to be a part of that. I think that's our greatest need. We don't have anybody in this state. It's one of the big concerns we have in this country. With the president wanting to renew the infrastructure movement in this country, we've got to get after that, and we need people who understand it, and I think I'd be a great fit for there. Ways and Means is the place I'd love to be. It's very difficult for an incoming freshman to get on that committee, but it's where the impact is. It's a very big committee. They need some financial savvy on there. What's going on, with what's happening right now in the movement. We've got to get our tax codes permanent for you and I and for the small businesses in America. That's where it originates from. We've got to take this economy, what's going on right now, get your tax policies for you personally, for our small businesses, put into stone. They're permanent, just like the corporations have been done. So that's where I'd like to be.
Thank you. Next question, party platform. 90-second answer on this, and we'll start with Kevin. Do you agree with the Republican Party platform, and where do you differ?
Wow, Pat, you've got me on that one because I haven't gone back and read it since last year, so I don't know if there's been any changes. So I don't, one of the things I will tell you, I agree with President Trump's platform. I don't know if it's the party's platform. And I wanted to finish my answer a minute ago, ran out of time. Okay. You asked me why I wanted to support Donald Trump. He's a guy that believes in the true value of creating jobs and putting America back to work. And somebody says, well, government, first thing, people say, government doesn't create a job. No, but government does a lot to keep jobs from being created. So getting out the dadgum way will allow jobs to be created. The second thing is that we've got an opportunity here to move people to off dependence of the government. That is part of the platform, to get people, able-bodied Americans, off of government. During the Obama administration, from 2008 to 2016, 30 million people were put on food stamps. 30 million. We currently have 6.7 million jobs in America with nobody working. Nobody working. That's part of the platform. We've got to get folks into those jobs, just like we did back in 97, 8, 9, and 2000 when we started running budget surpluses. We were creating jobs, moving Americans off of welfare through the Welfare to Work Act of 1996, by the way, which is still in force. We're just not going and using the bill appropriately because it's been wavered out in the states. And we got to move people back that can work, take care of those people only that we need to take care of, and the people that can work. We have dumbed down the dignity of work in America. We've got to get folks back in these jobs so we can grow this economy and experience a great revolution that we're seeing for the next 20 years.
Tim, same question. 90 seconds.
The Republican platform decides and describes who we are. Less government, individual liberty, personal moral responsibility. Those are some foundations in our platform that I stand for. Ladies and gentlemen, you know this as well as I do. We are the party of life. The other party is really the party of death. You look at what they passed in Colorado. They now have a doctor-assisted suicide, okay? We don't want things like that in this country. We know that if we preserve life and we want to support life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we have the party that can do that. And so, again, it's never about swearing allegiance to a party or a platform or a person, but it is swearing your allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. You take an oath to support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's what you have to overlay all the bills and policies that you look at. And for me as a Christian, I have to take God's holy word and lay that on top of that. Those will be the two defining things that I do to determine how I vote and what I do.
Thank you. Next question, 90 seconds. We'll start with Tim. Since being in office, Congress has passed nearly 200 bills, all of which President Trump has signed. He has not vetoed a single bill. What would you say are the 2 or 3 most important bills that the president has signed? 90 seconds, Tim, go.
Oh, my gosh. I think the ones that are more important are the ones that we can't make any forward with it, even when a Republican is in the House, Republican is in the Senate and in the White House, and that's immigration. We've kicked that can down on the road for at least 25 years. Shame on us for doing that. It is not the executive's responsibility to come up with an immigration program. It's Congress's, right? And we have to step up and have the political courage to do that. Now, the specific bills, I'll be truthful with you, I can't name off those bills, but I think what's happening right now is we are deregulating, and I know those are some of the bills, and I really appreciate that, because less regulation allows free enterprise and competition in the marketplace to move forward. When that moves forward, you know, usually what happens, competition always drives down prices, which makes goods and services cheaper for you, the consumer, the American people. So when we look at that, you know, we're also looking at some bills coming out of the EPA, all right? You know, Scott Pruitt, you know, did a lot of good things with the president, regardless of some of the other problems that he had. He's trying to retract out of the Obama administration a little bit by little bit by little bit, backing away from the Paris Accord is a good thing, but it doesn't happen until 2020. So as you look at these things, I think it's more important for us to concentrate on what isn't moving forward that we need to get moving forward, because we see the success we've had on what he has signed.
Kevin Hearn, same question. 90 seconds, go.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question, Pat. The first one is obviously and I won't get the political name right, but basically it's the new tax code change that was signed into law. First time that's happened in 32 years since President Reagan. It took President Reagan 6 years to get to that point. President Trump did it in his first year. I know that doesn't seem like an amazing task. That is amazing that president after president have tried to redo the tax code and couldn't get it done. And this president, who is a business guy, a master negotiator, came in and got it done. So that's the first one. That will have impact for years to come. It will have bigger impact whenever we get up there and we fix it permanently for you and I and for the small businessmen and women in this country. The second thing is what he did with CFPB. And when he signed into law that we're going to start having it under the guise of what's going on in Congress, so that it's not a runaway agency out there like it was under President Obama that could go out and do stuff like Dodd-Frank, who could go out and create this other rogue agency that nobody had any control over. Think about that. It was another agency out there that was actually even more rogue than anything we've ever created before. Truly an administrative state, a dark group that had they even argued when we were trying to change out the chairman that the person underneath them had to go. They wanted to create this cycle where that would always be independent. And the president fought back, changed the law, signed the law into effect, and now we have oversight by the government.
All right, Kevin, just stay standing up. President Trump has made the repealing of burdensome and costly regulations on businesses one of his top priorities. What one regulation on businesses in the 1st District would you advocate for the president to target for repeal?
Well, Obamacare. It has not been repealed. I mean, he's done everything he can. He did. He gave Congress their opportunity. They didn't get it done. The best thing we got was the removal or the suspension, if you will, of the mandate, the penalty for the individual mandate, which can just quickly be put back into place with the next president, the executive order. The Democratic Congress can push on that, and we've got Obamacare full-blown back into force. You know, if you look at what's going on right now, I know this for a fact. I was just told this week that the Democrats truly believe they're going to take over. They already have. What they've typically done in the past is to try to push labor laws through individually. Because when you're in, the administration's in charge, the National Labor Relations Board is a 5-member group that's always in the majority of the sitting administration. So it's very easy when a Democrat group is in play, but not so easy when a Republican's in play. The Democrats have already put into place a package that has everything in it. One package. It has unionization, it has card check, it has $15 hour minimum wage, everything that pretty much violates all free market principles in this country. They are salivating. Nancy Pelosi is salivating to become the next Speaker of the House, to impeach our president and take over this country with unions. You just don't think it can't happen. Think what just happened in Missouri with right to work just lost. We just overturned it. Beware of these labor unions coming across America. That's their opportunity to regain and get $300 to $400 million in new fees so that they can start pushing back on everything that's conservative in this country.
Same question for Tim Harris. What would be the number one thing that you would advocate for the president to repeal? District 1.
Medicaid reform. If we don't get this right, ladies and gentlemen, think of this. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the interest on the debt is 2/3 of our budget. 1/3 of our budget is only discretionary. You can talk about the discretionary till you're blue in the face. If you don't do something with the 2/3 that is burying us, we won't make any forward progress. So when I look at those kinds of things, Medicaid has to be looked at. I mean, I think Arkansas looked at it and they saved $800 million. Right? If we look at it, and I wish that it had come when Republicans had a chance to repeal Obamacare, that it would come back to the states in block grants. So then the states would administer it and they would know how much. There is so much fraud and abuse with people that are on Medicaid. That's what we have to do. We have to do those kinds of audits to make sure that dead people are not on there in Oklahoma, that they don't live in another state and they're double dipping, right? That if they are an adult and they can work, that they are out there getting a job and not working and not bleeding the system. If we do something with Medicaid, we will look really into the future, solving one of the major problems that are hurting us financially and killing us from a fiscal standpoint of view.
All right. One more quickie before we wrap things up with the 90-second closing statements. Tim, I'll start with you. This is a short one, 60 seconds. If you could say just one nice thing about the other guy, what would it be?
I honor you for capitalism has really worked in your life. I've heard your story. It certainly is a rags to riches. You're a multi-millionaire, and you have done some great things, and I think you should be honored for that.
Kevin, same deal.
I think Tim has been a great Christian man from everybody that I've talked to across this district. I didn't know Tim before I started running, and that's probably a good thing. Usually the people that know him have done really bad things. But I've known people who've... but the people that I've known and talked to about Tim have said he's a fine Christian man, a great Christian man. And, you know, at the end of the day, when this is all done and we all go home, there's nothing more important than that. We'll argue and fight. He's my brother in Christ, and this is, you know, it's a shame. I told Tammy the other day, it's a shame that for 18 months we've been beating up on Republicans. And the Democrats are sitting over there. I guess they're still there. I don't know. I don't ever hear from them. But, you know, the reality is that that's what matters most in all of this. This is what changed my life when I was 31 years old because of my wife. And I know, you know, unbelievably in this district we were made fun of. But that's okay. I mean, I've been told my entire life I should quit, that I couldn't do it, couldn't make it, and we just pushed back. So, Tim, thank you so much for being a good Christian brother.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that.
All right, Rhonda, Kevin goes last, right? Okay. All right. We've got 90-second closing statement, starting with Tim Harris. And gentlemen, I'd also ask you to give out your website, how people can contact you as well at the end. 90 seconds, Tim. Go, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming this evening. You're going to have to make a choice in 11 days, and that's this. It's not really about me. It's not even about Kevin. It's about you. What do you want? Who do you want to be your voice in Washington, carrying not a personal agenda, but carrying your agenda? You know, I'm running in this race because I love this country. It's given me so much. And the things that I want to do, I want to use the fact that I am a public servant and I'm not a politician. I have passion for people. You know you can trust me. You know I'm steady. You know I'm reliable. You know I have a record. You know my word is my bond, and I have 16 years that you can rely upon. I lead by example with a servant's heart. Instead of telling people how to do it, I showed them how to do it. That's what we need in Washington. I'm a listener. In all my years, I had to learn how to be a good listener. I will listen to you. And yet I have great negotiation skills. I will negotiate that which needs to be negotiated without ever walking away from my principles because of my experience. I'm mature, I'm seasoned, and I've been a decision maker my whole career. Life and death decisions were in my hands, and I made those in behalf of people. That's why nothing in Washington can scare me or intimidate me to stand up for you, to be your voice for your kids and your grandkids, standing for the rule of law, standing for our freedom of speech and all of our constitutional rights. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you.
Kevin Hern.
First of all, I want to say thank you all for being here tonight. I know there's folks obviously on both sides of the fence here, and some of you know are voting for the other person for various reasons, and I appreciate you all being here because at the end of the day, one of us is going to be your congressman in 11 days from now. I don't believe the Democrats have a chance. I'll say that out loud.
Amen. Amen, brother.
But, you know, what I will tell you, there's a contrast between Tim and I, and the difference is, and actually he alluded to it in his kind words, and I appreciate that for recognizing the fact how difficult it has been to get to where we are today. My fear is that people today could never achieve what I've achieved in this country, because of the regulation, because of the burdensome debt we have in this country. And it really troubles me, seriously, to the bottom of my heart. It troubles me to know that your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, after you're long gone, after I'm gone, won't have the opportunity that I've had. And that's really problematic for me. I don't need to go to Washington, D.C., but I think we have an opportunity right now to support a president who is 72 years old, who ran, who didn't need to run. It's the last thing he needed. He didn't need any more name ID. It was an opportunity to go. We can't send somebody else to Washington, D.C. that wants to go up there and not support this president, that doesn't understand what he's trying to get done. I've seen it firsthand. The risk is that, if I thought another attorney could do it, I would step aside. I think we need a business person and business people to go help this president achieve what it is. HernForCongress.com before Michael switches that. HernForCongress.com. Thanks, Mike. Thank you all so much.
These guys deserve a huge round of applause for taking the questions. CD1 will be in good hands come November, regardless of who wins. So I want to say thank you for coming and sharing your date night with us. This is one for the books, and I want to encourage you, of course, to get your friends to vote. And thanks to Pat Campbell for coming out and moderating this event. I think he did a phenomenal job. Thank you.